Um, Chrono Cross, or rather Crosscode, another game that was supposed to be based on Chrono Trigger, I had gotten really excited for, but supposed to be based on Chrono Trigger, I had gotten really excited for, but in not seeing and seeing someone stream it, I think it was Andy Cortez of the Kind of Funny Parish. And seeing it was mainly puzzles bummed me out greatly, but I had not given up hope. Um, then the Chrono Cross remaster showed up and sucked. But even still, I had not. I had figured someday someone would make a game that would be worthy of Chrono Trigger, and it clearly wouldn't be Squeenix, as the Chrono Cross remake contained the most half-ass perfect ending I've encountered in a while. But I don't just say that to talk crap, but to consider that's probably the best I can expect from them, and would have to look elsewhere. First thing you'll notice is the excruciatingly detailed sprites. I at first thought, like mini games, this would be a well animated, cutscene laden entry point, but no, the animations continue to oppress, with even the most basic enemies having expressive idle spell casting and other animations. The graphics are absolutely gorgeous, though. There's ever evidence against Sega's 2D games don't age well diatribe. It's this game. Obviously, the sprites give it an aesthetic, but they're detailed and have many frames that could be skipped, tweened, or removed altogether. Like, for instance, enemy characters have unique power up animations for their moves, which I'm sure if the text flashed and said enemy use claw attack with a slight effect, we would all understand. Characters all have different dialogue frames, including if they're happy, angry, etc. But on top of that, there's a lot of ambience in the sprites, including a day-night system with shadows. My hat is truly off to this company for putting what must be thousands of hours into putting this art piece together. People have also said that this was influenced by Golden Sun, which I've never played and only have a cursory knowledge of, but even still, I can see it with the characters being elemental students traveling the land with little fanfare and a bit of platforming. While the story starts in a typical place, it quickly becomes much more than meets the eye with the near omnipotent beings. The story seems relatively inoffensive, and the main characters aren't all that exciting, but I do appreciate the fact that they aren't completely silent and have some conversation. This does become problematic when a party member who isn't even deputized to be a solstice warrior, the game's trademark heroes who dedicate their lives to getting rid of evil dwellers, starts to make decisions and buttons when I definitely would rather he didn't. The story does pick up and become slightly more interesting, as it seems to be tradition in Sabotage Studio games. The change happens. Change being in quotes. I like this portion of the game much more than the rest, especially as part of it consists of you getting the first part consists of you getting tricked by a pirate with a ship that's actually worse than what Luffy of One Piece fame started out with. Combat left me with something to be desired, and that while they may have been inspired by Chrono Trigger, it isn't completely that way. You time your hits in defense, like in the Mario RPG series, but it isn't just slavishly looking towards the old. It introduces a bit of choice. During your turn, you can swap between characters, except when you can't, which is slightly confusing, and your opponents will have a countdown for when they're going to act. Actually, that was much earlier impressions. You can just switch whenever, but your enemy may end up going next. So that's part I needed to edit out. But here we are, and your opponents will have a countdown for when they're going to act. The idea here is you need to figure out how to stop the enemy from casting spells. The appropriate counterattacks will appear above their heads. You can't just brute force it. But on top of that, they add in another element. They introduce, I'm not even sure what to call it, if you do a melee attack on the enemy, elemental orbs will pour out from them. You can pick these orbs up to empower your next attack with moon or sun or other elements as you get to them. You would want to do this to attack enemies that cannot be harmed normally, increase the damage of your attack, or try to stop an enemy from casting a spell, because Your attack will now deal physical and magical damage. The problem is, unlike Mario RPG, it isn't a static, this character goes, that character's goes system. Enemies can move at various speeds and require various attacks against them to stop their spellcasting. It sounds like a lot, it is. That being said, the game continues to reassuring you that perfection in combat isn't necessary, almost literally in text, and characters will self-revive in combat after a set number of turns. Continuing to talk about combat, there's a lot of moving elements on screen, which can be jarring if you don't expect that, since a central game mechanic is timing. The Mario and Luigi, Paper Mario, and other games all mitigated this by more or less having your characters be in static places. Heroes on the left and the baddies are on the right. Yes, this would occasionally change, but not so much you would get, cheap game overs, etc. Chrono Trigger, however, did have his characters move around, but the difference is there was no timing involved there. I'm guessing because of the way sprites are drawn, they can't do every animation everywhere, so they move the UI and characters and stuff like that to get around the issue. Speaking of UI, the UI actually even randomly moves around, and I don't know if I'm getting old, but this caused some confusion in the middle, the heat of battle for me. One of the huge gets Sea of Stars ended up with was its music being partly composed by Yasunori Mitsuda, who did Chrono Trigger, of course, among other things, definitely legendary. In opening up the Matt McMuscles video for this game, I was a bit taken aback how the music sounded, as this is not what I expected from Mitsuda. And basically I did end up going back to the soundtrack and trying to figure that out for myself, and definitely they gave Mitsuda like a handful of tracks, I want to say less than 6, that definitely sound really good. But if we're trying to reach Chrono Trigger, that game had a serious staff behind it, even in the music. But yeah, I went back to the soundtrack, and it's pretty decent. And, Giant Bomb even gave the game a nod during their Game of the Year pleasantries. A lot of it is catchy, but I just think overall, much like the Magneto meme, I urged the game to show me its true self, which soured my experience in listening to the music and getting through about the first 70% of the game. Also in the game, are full-blown acoustic sea shanty versions of many of the tracks, which are in astonishing quality. I can't put this up there with Chrono Trigger, but I can recommend it as a game that's solid, though not perfect, successor. Regardless, the game has sold extremely well. This is great news for the developer, Sabotage Studio, and for people like me who see 2D games as a thing of beauty, not a relic of the past, Sega.